Welcome to the Conversations That Matter podcast, where we are crafting a bold Christian vision for America. I'm your host, John Harris. We are going to talk today about the future of the right. The future of the right. The right, of course, politically is an important element for conservative Christians because they have had a seat at the table on the right for a long time, and they don't have any voice on the left. The left has some self-proclaimed Christians that inhabit the ranks of their support, but they act as liaisons towards religious communities. They don't actually have an effective influence on policy as Christians, whereas on the right, that's not the case. Christians have had a lot of influence and continue to have some influence, and it would be a shame if that influence diminished or if a new coalition emerged where they did not have the same kind of influence they have currently. And so I think this is important for Christians. I think it's important for conservatives. I happen to be a traditional conservative or a paleo-conservative. I recognize that there are those on the right I have very fundamental disagreements with. For example, on something like the free market, I very much believe in the free market, but I am not an absolutist or an ideologue on the free market. I think there are limitations to this. When you have prostitution, gambling, and pornography, it influences your society in such negative ways, it's not worth it to be able to freely sell those kinds of services and commodities. And it is perfectly fine to limit those things for the good of your community. And so there's many other things we could talk about, but I have my disagreements. But I think fundamentally the right has recognized that they share certain things in common, even if there's differences on how private property and the free market should work. There is a commonly shared interest in pursuing things like private property and pursuing things like federalism and smaller government, because we think that government is best when it's closest to the people, and pursuing things like a strong national defense, even if neocons are much more comfortable going around the world and setting up military bases and getting involved in things, and paleocons are much more reluctant to do something like that, to say the least. There's still this recognition that we do need to have a strong military. And we are up against, and have been for decades, a threat that wants to essentially disrupt and rethink, reimagine, revolutionize what America is at a fundamental level, the left. And so we see the left as a commonly shared threat. We band together to fight them. And lately, we have had some wins. We've been able to do some things that have been, I think, very productive. And I know there's a lot of people that are not as enthusiastic about the Trump administration as they were when they voted for him. But as I pointed out in my December podcast on the year in review, Trump has actually done quite a number of things for both Christians and conservatives. And he's up against a lot of forces that would oppose him, but he has done a lot of things. He has made progress. And it would be a very different world if Kamala Harris had won that particular election. And so I'm very interested in keeping this going. It's a fragile coalition. It's on a knife's edge, but we need to continue to band together to defeat a greater enemy. We don't have the luxury of not working together. And I think Charlie Kirk really understood that. But there are people today who are talking about a coalition with the left that makes me uncomfortable. And I've noticed this for the past year, really ever since Trump was elected. It seemed like there was fanfare for about 2 months, 3 months. And then I started hearing criticisms. And finally, I started hearing black pill kind of language about how we should be accelerationists, or we should band with the left. The left is actually better on certain issues than the establishment is on the right, because usually the left is anti-Israel. And I can't believe what I'm hearing. But a lot of this stuff is relegated to people of no influence online, but there's a lot of them. Until you start hearing things like this, and this is what I want to talk about. I'm going to play for you 2 clips. The first is from Nick Fuentes. The second is from Tucker Carlson. So let's start off with this. This is from Nick Fuentes last year.
The left has to give up immigration. That's simple. The left is going to have to give up. Look, we can have equity and we can have equality in the country. We can have civil rights. We can have all those things, but we have to close the damn borders. We have to close it. Too many illegal immigrants, too many legal immigrants. That has to be the compromise. The left has to give on immigration, and the right has to give on the free market. If the right can come down on health care and on a social safety net and maybe on some subsidies for education, and if the left can come down on the anti-white open border stuff and they can agree that we have a country, that party will win 90% of the vote and rule for a century. That's the compromise. That's the populist compromise.
Now, you notice in that clip, it's a very low bar. The right only has to give up the free market, and the left really only has to give up immigration, and they can come together. And you wonder, what about abortion? What about education? What about federalism? What about sexual anarchy? Are these the only issues? Really? We can just come together on these things. Here's Tucker Carlson saying something different, but similar. He wants to form a coalition of decent people. But who are these decent people? You'll find out they're Kamala Harris voters. Here's the clip from AmFest in December.
Yes, there is a possibility for a huge coalition of decent people once they free their minds from the traps set for them by others and realize, wait a second, we all want to make this country better. And the 15% or 30% who don't, okay. Good luck in Maryland or wherever you wind up. But the rest of us would like to fix it.
Now, I want to point out something about this clip. Tucker is critiquing, in the context, people on the right who are anti-Islam. And he says it's disgusting the kinds of things people on the right, so Trump voters, are saying about Islam, Muslims. And then he goes on and he says what you just heard. And if you connect the dots, if you're thinking through this in the flow of the speech, really what he's saying is up to 85% of the country are decent Americans that could form a political coalition. And the people who are not decent apparently inhabit the right. So it means that there's more decent people on the left, and it means that you're going to have a whole lot of Kamala Harris voters in this decent person coalition with you, this new coalition. Now, I'll submit it to you out there. Do you think that Kamala Harris voters who are feminists, who are pro-abortion, who are pro-sexual anarchy, who are open borders, who are socialists, do you think that these people are fundamentally decent and the kind of people you want to build a coalition with for politics? And I think the answer for any kind of conservative, of any worth his salt in any way, is going to say, of course not. These are the people we just defeated. Why would we want to build a coalition? And if you say that, you're asking the same questions that I'm asking. And I've been asking them for about a year now. And I am continuing to see this kind of rhetoric ramp up, where there's a lot of criticism of Israel and AIPAC and alliances with Israel. And because of that, there seems to be a shared commonality with the left. Now, maybe it's not all that. The two clips I just played for you don't mention Israel. So, I mean, you could say Muslims, that's sort of related tangentially to the Israel issue. But I see these things as working together. And it's in development, so it's a little hard to analyze when it's in development. But it seems to me like, based on guests that have appeared on programs like Tucker Carlson, there is a shared enthusiasm for anti-Israel politics. And it's not just that there's a shared enthusiasm, it's that this is now a top priority. And to some, it's the only priority, I think. They are more than willing to sabotage the coalition that has existed and defeated Kamala Harris if it means that we get anti-Israel policies. I think Nick Fuentes is another guy to mention along these lines. He has said repeatedly that Gavin Newsom is preferable to J.D. Vance. And at first people were defending this and saying, look, he's just trying to influence the Republican Party primary here. Well, it's an interesting way to do it. But then I think after the Clavicle interview on Michael Knowles, and Clavicle is this, honestly, a guy you shouldn't even know the name of, but now I have to talk about him because he's influenced online right spaces. He says that J.D. Vance is this Chad. He's got a jawline. He's got a white family. And look at J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance looks fat. And he's got an Indian family. And And this was something that a number of people, Nick Fuentes included in this, thought was just great. It was just great that he was saying this tonight, Michael Knowles. And I look at the whole thing and I think to myself, this is immature. This is childish. This isn't facing reality. Maybe this is just being edgy to be edgy and saying things that you're not supposed to say to offend the establishment. But then it kind of dawned on me. And I think this is the heading that where all the pieces might fit in. The establishment on the Republican Party, and this now includes people like Ted Cruz, people who were very anti-establishment a decade ago are now part of the establishment. So the establishment in the Republican Party is mistrusted for a variety of reasons. They're not doing enough. They're not doing it fast enough. They don't look out for fellow Americans enough. We want to see more progress. We want to see more positive developments towards getting all the illegal migrants and beyond out of our country. We want to see the economy healed. We want to see the complete end of the DEI stuff. And Trump has done so many things towards these ends, but it's not enough. It's not fast enough. And if you look at these guys, sometimes it seems like they're very, they have a lot of allegiance towards a foreign country, and it's not America. It's Israel. And I've seen some of these things, and it's understandable, where they say, look at this senator over here. He is tweeting more about Israel than he is his own home state that he's supposed to represent. And that's a fair critique, I believe. That's not universal, but that is happening. There's a huge magnifying glass on AIPAC right now. And I realized I had Trevor Loudon on, and we talked about this. I mean, there's a number of other organizations that have congressional sway, even beyond AIPAC's ability. But AIPAC, I think, has the magnifying glass on it because it is very specific to Republican Party interests right now. It wasn't always that way. You still have guys like John Fetterman in the Democratic Party, but things have shifted. Things have shifted a lot for the left. And the road that the right, some elements of the right are on right now, has been forged a long time ago by the left. The college town near me has protested against Israel every so often, and lately it's been a lot more. But and a lot of Jewish people out there doing it, which is the ironic part, I suppose. But they see Israel as a colonial power. They are against their weaker neighbors, and we have a responsibility to stand against them, and we should never support them. And when you see support going to Israel and hungry veterans at home and this kind of thing, it makes people mad, and I think rightly so. But I think behind all this, on the left, is a third worldism, is a anti-Western sentiment. And I didn't think at first that was what was animating the right, and I am having to reevaluate that because I am starting to see that more. And so I wrote an article, and the article is entitled, Will the Right Join the Left? I phrased it that way on purpose. It's on my Substack, and I go through some of these things. And one of the things I point out is in New York City, Mamdani voters, 62% of them, according to Data for Progress, said that they voted for Mamdani because of his support for Palestine. And you think to yourself, well, that's kind of weird. He's the mayor of New York City. How in the world would support for Palestine matter in a race like that? Shouldn't domestic issues matter? He doesn't have any authority to influence our foreign policy unless he goes farther with it and tries to run for president or something. Republicans have seen an opportunity in all this. If the Democrats lose Israel and the coalition that used to benefit both parties, I mean, there's Democrats who are pro-Israel, Republicans who are pro-Israel, but if the Republicans kind of corner the market on that, that means that money, some at least, and they get votes from the Jewish community. And this isn't 100% of Jews, because there's obviously a lot of Jews that are on the left. That actually became very abundantly clear in New York City. But there's at least, even if it's a popular myth, there is a popular sentiment that we're going to corner the market on this, and it's going to benefit our coalition even more. And this has been part of the Trump coalition to be pro-Israel. So there's a rift that has been forming, and there's, I think, now a contest forming to see who can be more anti-Israel. who can, and that is deemed as authentic. And I think that's what happened. I'm close to New York City, so that's what happened in this mayoral race. Mamdani was young, he was fresh, and he came across to voters as more authentic. They thought, well, he's legitimate. There was a man years ago, I remember, who was from an African country, Kenya, and he voted for Obama. And the reason he was a Christian, and he said, I just vote for the younger candidate because I figure they have less time marinating in corruption, and so they're more likely to do the right thing when they get into office. And I thought, well, that's a really bad sign, right? If your country's so corrupt, it's the younger guy must be better. In our country, we've typically thought the older guy has more experience. And he could be corrupt, but we don't look at youth and age as being markers of that. You could have young, corrupt people. Well, now I'm starting to see that dynamic just start to emerge, and especially on the left. The younger you are, the less bought you are, the more you're idealistic, the more you're going to fight for the things that you say you're going to fight for. And so Mamdani wins. And it's interesting to me that there were some voices on the right that reacted to this win in very odd ways. Daryl Cooper was one of them. He expresses deep concern for the Palestinians, or the Gazans, I should say, all the time. But yet he said he couldn't care less who runs New York. So it's like the major city in your own country you don't really care much about, but you really care a lot about Palestine. And this sort of sentiment, this favoring a foreign group of people, is an odd thing to me. And it really, whether it's Israel or Gaza, or it's fine to care about those situations. I care about Nigerian Christians, but it's like, what about the people in proximity to you? What about the political situation in your backyard? You should care more about that. And Dave Smith said Israel betrayed Trump by launching an attack on Iran. He then apologized for his support for Trump, said Trump should be impeached. He was wrong, of course. Rising Lion, the operation against Iran, was coordinated with the United States. Trump even stood up to Netanyahu and called off the missile attacks Netanyahu was engaging in at the end of that conflict. But there's this narrative that Israel, just orders the United States around, and Trump does whatever Israel wants. And I think a lot of people who were not as politically aware have become more aware of the influence of organizations like AIPAC and Israel in general. And I don't know, to me, I've been aware of this for a long time. So it's not, and I know there's other organizations that also exert tremendous influence. I know Qatar has tremendous influence on our country, especially through funding education programs. I know China has tremendous influence through lobbying, spying, front groups. I mean, BLM front groups. Freedom Road Socialists was basically a BLM style socialist group that was funded by Chinese communists. And this was very important in 2020. 2020 was kind of the year everyone was sort of waking up to the fact that, wait, China really does have a lot of influence. This isn't good. And all of a sudden, it's like now Israel's the only focus. And it's an odd thing to me a little bit. Aid to Israel constitutes 0.054% of the budget, whereas things like entitlements are 60 to 65%, national defense 13 to 14%, education 2%, and that's not including the states. These are the issues that have animated me quite a bit more. But Israel is now becoming the top, the first, the second, the third priority, whether or not you're pro or anti. There's groups that are also very pro-Israel that are just making this the main thing. They're reacting against the very anti-Israel crowd, and what they see emerging on the right, they're drawing parallels. They're saying this looks a lot like what was happening on the left. And I think there is a cost in all this to conservative identity. When you make an issue like that the paramount issue, to the point that you don't care about the other identifying issues. I do think the abolitionists, honestly, are going to be running victory laps, not because they're in support of what's about to happen if trends continue, but because they're going to say we were right, that voting for Trump has made the coalition weaker on abortion, and abortion's now kind of a lesser issue. And it's just becoming less and less and less of an issue. And now, of all things, whether we support Israel or not has become the top thing. And this is despite the fact that Netanyahu is now saying he doesn't want any U.S. foreign aid, doesn't need it. which is basically what I've wanted my whole life. My position has always been on Israel since I can remember. They make good allies for the most part, which I'll explain in another blog. It's not for this. I think there's there's 5 reasons in my mind that I think being an ally with Israel is actually smart for Middle Eastern foreign policy. But I have never wanted us to send aid in military or just money, any of that. I don't like it. I don't like it to any country, especially when we're in debt. But this has been the main thing now for a lot of people, a growing number of people. We'll see if that number continues to grow. And so these other concerns seem to be less of a concern, and Israel seems to be more of a concern. And you can even see the guests on top right podcasts when they have a guest that's coming from the left on, which isn't a wrong thing to do, but when they have someone on, what's the shared interest? Oftentimes it's an anti-Israel sentiment of some kind. So I see this happening. At the same time, I see kind of an anti-elitist sentiment. And I think the two might just be the same thing. It may just be that the upper elite class in the Republican Party is pro-Israel. That's one of their identifying markers. And so it's one of the things to disdain them for. It's like also this example. Tucker Carlson was asked last year if he had $50 million. And he cursed out the student who asked it. I think the student just stated it. And I know actually no student asked it. And Tucker cursed him out. And then it's a very odd thing to me because that would be something that Trump would find flattering. He would actually embellish and say, no, I'm very successful. I have more money than 50 million. But it's an embarrassment. It's a sign of being a sellout because I think it's a sign of being part of the elite. And no one wants to be that right now. Another example would be James Fishback. And I'm going to actually talk about this a little more in depth in a moment, but he basically put out a statement, and he keeps putting out similar statements where he goes after his former employer. And one of the things he always mentions is, my billionaire employer or millionaire, whatever it is, like as if that's really a relevant thing. It's an identity marker. Pro-Israel, millionaire, these are the kinds of things that mean you're compromised in the Republican Party. And there is a feeling of betrayal and disdain for, I think, the upper class Republicans, the establishment, the elites. And it is so deep with some that they are willing to sacrifice the coalition that beat the left. They are willing to form new coalitions with the left. They are willing to potentially view issues that would offend them as the primary issues, and now sort of the barometer as to whether or not someone is legitimate or not. So I noticed someone actually sent it to me, so I didn't notice. Someone sent me Antifa right in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. One of their cells in Oregon proposed using Israel as a wedge issue to divide the right. And so to what extent the left is involved in all this, I don't know. But the left is certainly benefiting from these developments that we're talking about. Now, one of the case studies that I think is super interesting is James Fishback. He's running for the chief executive office in the state of Florida. He is a failure at everything he's done in life of any account that would qualify him for this office. He has been a dismal failure at. And yet, without character, without competence, just having only rhetoric alone, he has built an online presence where he is just ratioing on X his competitors. Now, he's only polling at like 5%. So this is going to raise questions as to whether or not X even means anything anymore. Does it mean what we think it means? I think we think it means a lot because Trump used it so often when he was ascending. But now, if you have incompetent people who can't win elections, but they're really big on the internet, what does that mean for the internet? Anyway, James Fishback, he's running, and he's Tucker Carlson's endorsed him. Nick Fuentes says nice things about him. He says nice things about Tucker and Nick Fuentes. And he is running on a platform that is every day changing a little bit. It's becoming just more and more far-fetched, more like talking about how he's going to send to everyone who works in Florida state politics an email every week asking them what 5 things they accomplished. And if they can't name anything, they're fired. Things like he's going to have Grand Theft Auto party, video game parties when he's governor for top students. Things like he's going to divest Florida of the money that they have invested in Israel bonds because he sees that as benefiting a foreign entity, and we shouldn't be doing that. Now, the thing with that is, if you're going to divest Florida of millions of dollars they've spent in bonds, and it's a high yield account, and it's tied to the retirement accounts, the pensions of Florida state workers, then you have to get approval from the legislature. You can't abandon your fiduciary responsibilities. So you do have to pay these pensions, and he wants to invest it in helping young people buy houses. So now you're creating a dependency and influencing the prices of homes in your state. These are all things downstream from this proposal that are very negative, but he is viewed by so many online as a champion of the people because he's going to really take it to Israel. And that's pretty much the only thing he can do. As the chief executive of the state of Florida, the only thing he can really do on Israel effectively is he can divest of foreign bonds. Now, there's a good argument to be made as to whether or not Florida should be able to invest in Israel like this. Shouldn't Florida invest in its own country, right? I understand that. I am very sympathetic to that. But the fact is, those investments have been made and they're high yield, and you can't just divest and do it in an irresponsible way and expect people to take you seriously, at least serious people. But there's a lot of people that I don't know if they're serious. They look at this rhetoric and they love it. And there's a lot of things like this with James Fischbach. He says a lot of things that even I like, but there's no mechanism that he has as the governor for implementing them. He's not going to be able to just on his own remigrate Venezuelan migrants from the country without, he can try, I suppose. You're going to be tied up in all kinds of federal lawsuits and stuff. And part of me wants a governor who's going to stand up and do things like this. But you have to choose your battles wisely. You have to choose what hills you're going to die on, and you need to do so in a way that actually moves the needle. And Fischbach is just throwing stuff out left and right, all over the place, things that he can't possibly do on his own. So this is kind of the nature of his campaign. Now, I'm willing to, based upon his rhetoric, I'm actually willing to give some of the benefit of the doubt, what I know of his rhetoric, that, okay, if he can accomplish those, 10% of those things, and I get it, vote for him. Here's the problem, though. He lacks competence in the worst way possible. Management skills that you need for an executive position, he doesn't have. He was sued by Greenlight Capital, his former employer, because he said that he was the head of macro and invested and oversaw $100 million in gains. There is no head of macro, and he never did that. He was literally a research analyst. To make matters worse, he violated his employee agreement by sharing confidential portfolio information. He has not paid back the over $200,000 in promissory notes that he took from the company. He lied about his position. He stole investment strategies. He isn't paying back the loans when they were due. And he wants you to elect him to be the chief executive of Florida. And he plays the class conflict thing when he's called on the carpet for it. So he put out this video, and when he was called out by one of his rivals for having not just a low character, but having his car repossessed. Now he has $37,000 in luxury clothing and accessories that the court is going after him for, because he's claiming he has the inability to satisfy the judgment against him. And he's called on the carpet for this kind of thing. And instead of owning it, this is what he says.
My name is James Fischbach, and for the last couple of weeks, I've been running to succeed Ron DeSantis as Florida's next Republican governor. I'm making this video because my opponent, Byron Donalds, has made a very serious allegation against me, an allegation that, if true, he argues I could not serve the people of my state. I'm making this video because you deserve to hear it from me directly. What Byron Donalds has alleged is 100% true. I'm not rich. I never have been, and I never aspire to be. He is right. I have student loan debt, credit card debt. My car was repossessed months ago because I couldn't make the payments, and my billionaire ex-boss has leveled millions of dollars of legal fees on me with his frivolous lawsuits, all because I decided to leave his firm and start my own. No one should be elected Florida governor by how much money they have in the bank, but how much fuel they have in their heart to fight for the families from Pensacola to Pahokee, Mariana to Miami. My name is James Fishback, and I'm running for Florida governor because Florida is our home, America is our birthright, and we can never let them steal it or repossess it from us.
Now, think through what you just heard. Fishback inflates the judgments against him. He plays class warfare, and he omits the actual reason he got himself into the mess in the first place. There's nothing inherently right-wing about this. It mirrors the way leftists who prefer to blame a rigged system for social disparities instead of taking responsibility frame things. This is a leftist tactic that James Fishback is engaging in, but it is red meat to his audience online. He claimed to be the Doge advisor. People who worked at Doge say no. And there's a lot of things like this. I mean, I probably am not even scraping the surface. There's questions about his own wife and his residency and his relationship with Christina Pushaw. And there's just scandal and incompetence that follow this guy around. But yet there are a lot of people that are seemingly on the right who are very satisfied with his rhetoric alone. And I think this is the problem. We are way too easy to satisfy. There is a class warfare thing going on here. There is a using the Israel issue as kind of a marker for who belongs in what class, and then making that the chief issue, or at least one of the big issues, even for local and state elections where foreign policy should not be a major concern. This has become a new kind of coalition forming before our very eyes. When he went to recently, when he went to speak with a far left candidate who was also running for a Florida position, he gave the impression to her that he was on her side. So it was an individual named LJ Holloway, and he said he co-signed her platform. He was fighting the same fight and agreed with her on issues such as affordable healthcare, teacher pay, energy costs, and standing with women. Now, I don't know about you, but if I say that to any leftist, I agree with you about standing with women. I agree with you about affordable healthcare and energy costs and teacher pay. People are going to get the idea that I'm agreeing with her policies. And you could say, well, he just wants to get to the same destination. It's just a different route. And that may be, but co-signing her platform saying we're fighting the same fight, that's odd. And so, will he gain support eventually from people who are on the left? Now, I'm not sure off the top of my head I think Florida may be a closed primary, so it may not be an option. But if this kind of sentiment continues, I think you're going to see more shared kind of cooperation between people on the right and the left. And people have talked a long time about the need for a third party, but usually it's a purist, like conservative party. That's not what's being talked about right now at all. And that is something that does pose a threat to the very unique arrangement that we've had that has been able to defeat people like Kamala Harris. We're on a knife's edge. And if we lose part of that coalition to this, then I think we're going to pay the consequences for our own children for years to come. So that's the concern I have. I realize there will be people in the comments that will think, I'm just pro-Israel or something, but that just proves my point, actually, though. I'm not someone like that. I just don't see Israel as the biggest issue. But because it's been pushed in my face now, and people have used that so often, they bring up Israel even when Israel's not being discussed. I have an obligation, I think, at this point to talk about it and to defend the position that I've held for a long time, which is that I think Israel should be an ally of our country, just like other countries should be allies. And we shouldn't be sending them aid. Netanyahu agrees with me now on that, which is amazing. But I'm going to defend the position because part of it is I don't want to lose the coalition to this insanity. There are also people that are way too pro-Israel that also see that as the primary issue. Those people definitely also exist. I don't see them really online as much, but I think there are some big donors and people like that that really see this as such a primary thing. I'm more of a domestic guy, but this has now become such a big issue. And I am not going to sit by and let us join the left on these kinds of things and endorse incompetent candidates because of their rhetoric on Israel. So that's where I'm at on this. I guess that puts me at odds with people like Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and others. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. That's just where I stand. That's what I think. I don't care if it costs me. I think the country is more important, and the future of the right is more important to me. I think the right needs to be Christian, moral, sensible. We need to bring back more competence, live up to the standards, not ditch them. We need more character, more integrity, more virtue. And the social issues are the issues that matter. More than the economy definitely matters. But I think more than the economy, more than even foreign policy, those things all matter. But I'm doing things for the conditions of my children. I want them to grow up with as much of the blessings of America, and I want to expand those blessings. And I want them to know what it is to live up to a high standard. So that's my heart in all this. I hope that means something to you. Maybe you resonate with it. And if so, I appreciate subscriptions to the podcast. I don't ask for that much, but I do appreciate the support. I appreciate you leaving comments. I do appreciate you supporting financially on Patreon, whatever. I do think that I am charting a path now that at least temporarily might not be as popular as some of the other paths that I'm seeing online, but things change very quickly in the online world. There's a lot of fickle people, and I'm going to hold up the standards. So God bless. Thank you so much for all your prayers, supports, for those who are doing that kind of thing. This has been the Conversations That Matter podcast. And until next time, fear God, stand strong, and love others. God bless.